So our opponent has Mulligan. Definitely going to keep this though. This we've got a bunch of 1 mana cards, and Utopia Sprawl plus Arbor Elf is a nice combination because you can enchant the forest with Utopia Sprawl, then untap it. So that's pretty cool, pretty neat trick. And Island Aether Vial. Okay. So that means we're probably up against something like Merfolk. I'm going to lead on the Arbor Elf. And that way we can potentially make an additional mana this following turn. We're not going to be able to cast Thragtusk, but if we drew a 3-mana card, we could play Utopia Sprawl and that card, for instance. Okay, Lord of Atlantis. So we're just gonna ramp here. So I'm gonna start with Utopia Sprawl on the forest. This is only a 2-color deck, so I'm just gonna name red here. And now we can untap it with the elf. And continue on. So just gonna deploy the rest of our threats. And we can actually Utopia Sprawl the same forest to get more of an advantage out of the elf. So we've got a ton of mana now. We've got access to a ton of mana with the Utopia Sprawl, the double Utopia Sprawl, and the birds and the elf. And we'll see what our opponent can do here, because we've got access to we could actually win next turn, which is just absurd. We could win next turn with Tooth and Nail. So if our opponent doesn't do anything to interact with our creatures here, I think we are going to win this game. So double Lord, sure, but now we can just go make our land drop and make 3, untap the forest. This is just absurd. So now we just make 6 all the way up to 9, cast Tooth and Nail with Entwine, and we're gonna get Xanagos, and then we're gonna get Emrakul, and put them both into play. And now we can just give our Emrakul haste, and we're going to make it a 30/30, and this is going to do it for game 1. Wow. I'm in shock right now. I don't even know what to think. I'm like, something about this the math must have been off. There's no way that this is turn 3. But yeah, it is. 9 mana. Utopia Sprawl, Arbor Elf, birds. Go get Xanagos plus Emrakul. And our opponent is just left helpless, assuming they're just waiting to concede this game. So yes, we will in fact be attacking. And the Annihilator 6 means that all of our opponent's permanents are gone. And that's going to be game 1. So that was essentially one of the best possible draws this deck can have. we can't expect that every time. So you have to think about how to sideboard for this matchup. So Blood Moon is a card that I'm not really a big fan of against Merfolk because it is just a single color deck for the most part. So for the Madcap experiments, the question is, do we want to be getting Platinum Angel or Platinum Empyrean, essentially? I think both have merits. The Angel being able to attack is kind of nice, but I think we're fine with just sticking with the Empyrean. So I like the Bonfire of the Damned. That's a way to wrath away our opponent's board. Hornet Queen seems okay, just as a way to swarm the ground. Harmonize could be an additional way to draw cards. Sudden Shock, it's fine, but sometimes once there's two lords in play, the Sudden Shock isn't as good. So I like Harmonize. I think I like Sudden Shock too because we're on the draw. We want to be trying to disrupt our opponent as much as possible. So I think the Primal Command and the Thragtusk are interesting cards. I don't think Command is that good in the matchup. So yeah, I'm gonna take out the Command and the Thragtusk and board in the Harmonizes and see how that plays out. Not sure it's correct. So we'll see how this works out for game 2. And remember, we were on the draw that game. Our opponent basically had a good draw, went ahead and played multiple lords, but it ended up just not really being relevant. Here we've got less of a stellar hand. This is a medium hand. We've got the Sudden Shock into Overgrowth. I am going to keep it. Certainly it's more mana sources than we would like. This deck only has 21 lands. So we've drawn 6 already, which is a little bit unlucky. But you know what? If we're just able to go kill a guy, play Overgrowth, and go back to the accelerating into Tooth and Nail game plan, that could work. So we actually would like our opponent to play a Lord here, rather than something like Silvergill Adept, just so we can get rid of it. So our opponent cooperated. And Harmonize, that's actually a pretty good draw. Happy to have it. Happy to have boarded it in. So actually, there was really no reason to Sudden Shock right there. Could have waited for this Maraudgery to come down, but don't think it was relevant. So just going to go ahead and play it. And now time for an Overgrowth. So now we can make 3, 4, 5, 6 mana on our next turn. So we're a little bit away from Tooth and Nail still. So we're hoping just not to die, but we certainly might die before being able to cast the Tooth and Nail, unfortunately, with Entwine. If we had creatures that we wanted to put into play in hand, that would be a completely different story. As is, we could be facing down lethal next turn rather. So we take 7 here. That's going to drop us down to 13. There's an Overgrowth. So let's see. Our opponent could activate both Mutavault. So we're not definitely dead. So I like casting the Overgrowth here. And this is going to give us more mana for next turn. So now we can Harmonize. And alright, so we have put ourselves in a situation where we've got 9 mana next turn. So we're going to once again, if we don't die this turn, which our opponent doesn't have lethal on board, we can then win with Tooth and Nail potentially. Now, if our opponent somehow has a counterspell or something of that nature, the Tooth or any type of interaction, something like a Vapor Snag would be real bad. Any of those types of cards, we are gonna lose. But I think that the plan is to just go for it next turn. Or okay, it looks like I miscounted there. So let's see. All right, I guess our opponent had 14. Sorry about that. All right, well, scratch that. We will not be winning with Tooth and Nail at all that game. So moving on to the sideboard here, the question is, what do we want to do? This seems like a play-draw matchup, so we are going to be on the play this game. And, do we want to make changes? The primal commands seem a little bit slow. Like, the gain 7 is nice, but our opponent's going to be attacking us for just as much damage, if not more, with all of their lords. So it's kind of just feels like a race. The Madcap Experiment, I could see wanting Platinum Empyrean, or Platinum Angel rather, instead of the Empyrean. But it's close. I think I'm just gonna go with my gut here and submit this same deck. I don't think we boarded incorrectly. It was just a weird game last game. So this is a hand I can definitely get behind. And we can turn 3 a Madcap Experiment, which could be good. Oh, there's a Gut Shot. Wow. That's actually quite good. So it looks like that was one of the cards our opponent sideboarded in. It does deal with our Mana Dorks very well. So I'm going to get a Stomping Grounds here off the Windswept Heath so that we have access to red mana. But we are missing right now that for another land. We really would like another land in hand to be able to Madcap next turn. Alright, so it looks like rather than a Lord like the other games, our opponent is going to just play Silvergill Adept here. And okay. So I think we do just go for the Madcap Experiment now. And this is going to get a Platinum Empyrean into play. And we're hoping that it ends up being good for us. Looks like our opponent's going to respond, though. This could be a Curse Catcher. Oh, wow, it actually is. That's really good. Okay. That was a blowout. We could have maybe played around that, but we do have another one. Plus Eternal Witness to return some of these cards in our graveyard, but that Curse Catcher was a big play off that Aether Vial, that's for sure. And now our opponent's going to be able to untap, have 2 counters on the Vial, and probably play multiple Lords here. So the Merfolk deck doesn't have that much disruption. There's a Spreading Seas, so it's a good thing we got this mountain so that now we have multiple sources of well, we have now just one source of red, but we have Voyaging Satyr, so it's essentially multiple. So the question is, how do we want to proceed here? I think we want to play the Utopia Sprawl on the forest. The one thing that Utopia Sprawl is vulnerable to is actually Spreading Seas. So if our opponent were to Spreading Seas the forest, I believe that the Utopia Sprawl would then fall off of it. And I think we just go for the Madcap experiment again. Sure, our opponent might have a counterspell for 1 mana, but they couldn't have... They can't Curse Catcher us again because Vial's on 2 now. Alright, there's a Spell Pierce, so our opponent did have a counterspell. That's quite unfortunate. And now I would suspect that a Lord gets Vialed in. We already saw Lord of Atlantis, so we know that our opponent has it. And it looks like instead it's going to be Silvergill Adept. So we can make 6 mana next turn if our opponent doesn't disrupt our lands. Ghost Quarter. Okay, so our opponent could actually Ghost Quarter our forest, which would set us back. It would set us back quite a bit, actually. So we're hoping that does not happen. So our opponent can attack us for 6. I can do the math. I promise. I just messed up last game, so we're at 8. Our opponent's got 8 power plus the Aether Vial, and okay, that Ghost Quarter is gonna set us back quite a bit. So now we're back down to 4 mana. Our opponent's only got 2 cards in hand, but because of the Spreading Seas and the Island Walk, these Silvergill Adepts are going to be able to crack us down to 6. So if our opponent has basically anything else, we're probably screwed. We're probably dead. But I think what we want to do is to play Eternal Witness here and get back Madcap Experiment. We can then hope to have the Witness back as a blocker. So we're going to get the Madcap back. The plan is for our opponent to not have another Lord, Counterspell, or anything like that. And so then we can next turn take the hits from the Silvergill, but if our opponent does have something to vial in here, that's going to be game. And it is going to be Phantasmal Image, so that's going to copy a Silvergill. Now all of these Silvergills have Island Walk, and unfortunately that Spreading Seas is still in play for us. So we had double Madcap, and somehow we're just not able to get one out. Pretty frustrating that our opponent had that Curse Catcher and then the Spell Pierce, plus a good draw backed up with Lord of Atlantis and multiple copies of Spreading Seas. So, yep, this attack is going to be lethal.